In the heart of Asia, a power unlike any the world had ever seen was stirring. This was the Achaemenid Persian Empire, a colossal dominion stretching from the sun-scorched sands of Egypt to the frosty peaks of the Hindu Kush. It was a civilization of staggering wealth, sophisticated culture, and unmatched military might. In the year 480 BC, this empire, the greatest force on earth, was about to unleash its full fury upon a small, fractured collection of city-states that dared to prize their freedom above all else, Greece. At the helm of this immense power was one man, Xerxes the Great, the King of Kings. Standing upon a golden platform, high above the plains of Sardis, he surveyed a sight that would have made gods tremble. Before him, an army stretched to the horizon, a living sea of humanity. Countless ranks of infantry, the elite immortals clad in magnificent armor, stood shoulder to shoulder. The earth shook with the stamping of thousands of cavalry horses, their riders brandishing lances that glinted in the dawnlight. Mighty war elephants, like moving mountains adorned with battle towers, trumpeted their challenge to the heavens. A forest of banners, each representing a conquered nation, now sworn to the Persian cause, snapped and fluttered in the wind. The air was thick with anticipation, a heavy blanket of dust and tension. The low, rhythmic thunder of war drums echoed across the valley, a heartbeat for the colossal war machine. Xerxes, draped in royal purple and adorned with jewels that outshone the morning sun, raised a hand. A hush fell over the million-strong host. His gaze was fixed westward, towards the distant shores of Greece. This wasn't just a campaign, it was a crusade. It was vengeance for the humiliation his father, Darius, had suffered at Marathon a decade earlier. It was a divine mission to bring the entire known world under the shadow of the Persian eagle. To the Greeks, reports of this army sounded like myth, a nightmare too vast to be real. How could they stand against such a force? The Persian Empire was not just an army, it was an entire ecosystem of conquest. Engineers, architects, and laborers moved with the soldiers, capable of bridging seas and carving canals through mountains. Their supply chain was a marvel, a river of grain and resources flowing from the heart of the empire to its farthest-flung frontiers. Every nation from Babylon to Ionia had sent its finest warriors to swell the ranks. Medes, Scythians, Indians, Ethiopians all marching under Xerxes' command. The sheer scale was an act of psychological warfare in itself, designed to crush the spirit of resistance before a single spear was thrown. The invasion was seen as an inevitability, a force of nature as unstoppable as a tsunami. For Xerxes, this was his destiny. He was not just a king. He was a divine instrument of the god Ahura Mazda, bringing order to a chaotic world. The Greeks, with their bickering city-states and their radical ideas of democracy and individual liberty, were an anomaly, a jagged edge on his perfectly mapped world that needed to be smoothed away. He would not just defeat them, he would erase their defiance from history, absorb them into his unassailable empire, and ensure that no one would ever dare challenge the might of Persia again. This was to be the final conquest, the campaign that would secure eternal glory. From his vantage point, Xerxes saw more than just soldiers. He saw the physical manifestation of his absolute will. He felt the power thrumming through the ground, the collective strength of 100 nations united behind him. A signal was given, horns blared, a cacophony that rolled across the plains like a wave of sound. The drums quickened their beat, and with a deafening roar that shook the very air, the great army began to move. It was a slow, inexorable tide of steel and flesh, a continent on the march. The ground trembled beneath the weight of millions of feet, the creaking of countless wagon wheels, and the thudding steps of elephants. The shadow of the empire was falling. Stretching its dark fingers westward, the invasion of Greece had begun. As this human earthquake rolled towards the Hellespont, on the other side of the Aegean Sea, the fractious city-states of Greece were just beginning to awaken to the existential storm gathering on their horizon. Their world was about to change forever. Thanks for watching, and be sure to subscribe for the next chapter in this epic story.
History isn't just what happened, it's what was hidden. Welcome to the Chrono Archives, where lost empires rise again, forgotten legends speak, and ancient truths are brought back to life. From world-shaping history and powerful myths to legendary rulers and timeless civilizations, every story here is carefully uncovered, deeply researched, and cinematically told. The past is calling, will you answer? Subscribe and journey through time, one unforgettable chronicle at a time.
In the sun-scorched lands of Laconia, under a sky as hard and clear as polished bronze, stood Sparta. This wasn't a city of poets or philosophers, but a city of stone, steel, and discipline. Every building, every training ground, every citizen was a testament to a single, unwavering purpose: to forge the finest warriors the world had ever known. And at the heart of this warrior society stood a king unlike any other, Leonidas. Clad in his iconic crimson cloak and gleaming bronze armor, Leonidas listened, his face a mask of stone, as messengers brought dire news from the north. The great king of Persia, Xerxes, was coming. An army of unimaginable size, a tide of men and steel, was poised to sweep over Greece, to extinguish the flame of freedom and plunge the world into servitude. The messengers spoke of cities already bowing to the Persian advance, of Greek states paralyzed by fear, unable to unite against the coming storm. The fate of Hellas hung by a thread. This news sent ripples through the stoic heart of Sparta. In the shadowed halls of the Gerousia, the Council of Elders, voices were raised in tense debate. Some, cautious and pragmatic, argued for prudence. The omens were unfavorable, they said. The religious festival of the Cornea was upon them, a sacred time during which Spartan law forbade the army from marching to war. To defy the gods and the law was unthinkable. They argued to wait, to fortify their own lands, to let the other Greeks fend for themselves. Why should Sparta bleed for Athens or Corinth, for city-states that often looked upon them with suspicion and jealousy? The Peloponnese could be defended. The Isthmus of Corinth could be held. Let the Persians exhaust themselves in the north. But Leonidas saw things differently. He was a Spartan king, a descendant of Heracles himself. Honor was not a concept to be debated, it was the very air he breathed. He looked at the young warriors on the training grounds, their bodies honed to perfection, their movements with spear and shield a deadly dance passed down through generations. He saw in their eyes the same fire that burned within him. To cower behind their walls while Greece burned was not the Spartan way. It was a betrayal of everything they stood for. For Leonidas, this was not a question of strategy, but of destiny. It was a choice between a long life of shame or a glorious death that would be sung for ages. He knew the prophecy of the oracle at Delphi: either Sparta would be destroyed, or she would have to mourn the death of a king from the line of Heracles. The choice was his to make. He could choose safety, and in doing so, condemn his name to obscurity and his people to dishonor. Or he could embrace his fate, and in doing so, become a beacon of hope for all of Greece. In a voice that cut through the fearful whispers and cautious arguments, Leonidas made his decision. He would not wait, he would not hide, he would go north. He would meet the Persian tide head-on. He would stand for the honor of Sparta and the freedom of all Hellenes. His decision was not just a military command, it was a moral declaration. He chose to show the world what it meant to be a Spartan. He chose honor over life. But the law was the law, and the elders would not permit the full Spartan army to march during the Carnea. So, Leonidas used a loophole. The king was permitted to take a personal bodyguard with him. And so, he began the solemn process of selection. He walked among the elite warriors of his city, the Hippies, his royal guard. He didn't look for the youngest or the strongest, he looked for something more. He chose men who were not just proven veterans, but also fathers. He chose men who had sons to carry on their name, to ensure their lineage would not be extinguished on the battlefield. This was not a mission from which they expected to return. He selected 300 men who understood the price of freedom. 300 fathers, husbands, and sons who were willing to make the ultimate sacrifice. They were not an army, they were an idea. They were a statement written in blood and bronze. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the valley, the 300 assembled. They bid farewell to their wives, their children, and their city. There were no grand speeches, no cheering crowds. Just a profound, heavy silence. The women of Sparta did not weep. They simply told their men to come back with their shields, or on them. Then, Leonidas turned his back on his home. With his chosen 300 falling into formation behind him, he began the march. Each footstep on the dusty road was a beat in a funeral dirge, but also the opening note of a legend. They marched out of Sparta, a tiny band of warriors against a sea of invaders, their crimson cloaks a flicker of defiance against the encroaching darkness. Their destination was a narrow coastal pass in the north, a place the locals called the Hot Gates, Thermopylae. It was there they would make their stand. It was there they would remind the world of the power of free men. The year is 480 BC. The vast Persian Empire, under its god King Xerxes, has descended upon Greece. A force so massive, it's said to drink rivers dry. The Greek city-states, fractured and often at war with one another, face a choice: submit or be annihilated. But a few defiant souls choose a third option: to fight, to stand against the tide. Their chosen battlefield is a narrow coastal pass named Thermopylae, a name that translates to the Hot Gates. It's a place where myth and geography collide. On one side, the sheer, unscalable cliffs of the Caledroman Mountains claw at the sky. On the other, the churning waters of the Malian Gulf. Here, the land itself becomes a weapon. This sliver of earth is barely wide enough for a few wagons to pass abreast. It's a natural choke point, a bottleneck where the overwhelming numbers of the Persian army would mean nothing. 1,000,000 men would be no more effective than 1,000 in this claustrophobic corridor. This was the strategic genius of the Greeks. They understood they couldn't win a conventional battle on an open plain. They had to change the rules of the game. So, they came here, to this unassuming strip of land, to make their stand. The plan was simple, yet audacious: hold the pass for as long as possible. Delay the Persian advance, buy precious time for the rest of Greece to rally its forces, for the Athenian navy to prepare. It was a strategy born of desperation, but rooted in tactical brilliance. At the heart of this desperate gamble stood 300 Spartans, led by their king, Leonidas. These were not just soldiers, they were the embodiment of a warrior society, honed from birth for this very purpose. A Spartan hoplite was a living weapon. Their training was legendary, a brutal regimen designed to forge unbreakable discipline and an absolute disregard for personal safety. They were the finest heavy infantry the world had ever seen. But they were not alone. Beside them stood warriors from across Greece: 700 Thespians, 400 Thebans, 1,000 Phocians, and contingents from other allied city-states. Nearly 7,000 men in total, a coalition of hope against an empire of conquest. Each man knew the odds. They knew that standing here was likely a death sentence, yet they stood. They were farmers, blacksmiths, poets, and potters, united by a common love for their freedom. Imagine the scene. The air is thick with tension, heavy with the scent of salt from the sea, and the faint, sulfurous smell rising from the hot springs that give the pass its name. Steam ghosts up from the ground, creating an eerie, almost supernatural atmosphere. The wind howls through the narrow gap, a mournful song that seems to carry whispers of the coming storm. The color palette is muted, all earth tones: the dusty brown of the road, the gray of the cliffs, the deep bronze of shields and helmets, the crimson of cloaks. It's a world stripped down to its essentials: rock, steel, and flesh. The Greeks form their legendary phalanx. It's more than just a formation, it's a living fortress of men. Shields, the large, round aspis, locked together, creating an unbroken wall of bronze. Each man's shield protects not only himself, but the man to his left. It's a system built on trust and collective responsibility. Behind this wall of shields, a forest of iron-tipped spears, the Doru, points towards the sky, ready to be leveled into a hedge of death. The men are packed shoulder to shoulder, a solid mass of muscle and resolve. Their bronze helmets, with their iconic crimson crests, obscure their faces, turning them into a single, terrifying entity. There's a quiet discipline, a practiced stillness that speaks of countless hours of drill, no wasted motion, no idle chatter. Only the rhythmic breathing of thousands of men, the creak of leather straps, and the relentless moan of the wind. Leonidas moves among his men. He's a king. But here, he is a soldier among soldiers. He doesn't command from the rear. He stands in the front rank, his shield locked with the others. His presence is a source of immense strength. He exchanges quiet words, a nod here, a hand on a shoulder there. He knows his men. He knows their families. He knows that every single one of them has a son to carry on his name, a requirement he set for this mission. These were not men throwing their lives away recklessly. They were men who had something to live for, and therefore, something profound to die for. Days pass in this state of heightened anticipation. The Greeks reinforce their position, strengthening an old Phocian wall that spans the pass. They go about their daily routines with a surreal sense of calm. They train, spar, and maintain their equipment. Herodotus, the great historian, tells us the Persians were baffled by this. Their scouts reported seeing the Spartans exercising, combing their long hair, and seemingly preparing for a festival rather than a battle. To the autocratic Persian mindset, this was insanity. They couldn't comprehend a mindset where men would willingly face certain death with such composure. But for the Spartans, this grooming was a ritual, a way of preparing to meet death with dignity and beauty. It was the ultimate act of defiance. The calm before the storm is always the most unnerving part. Every shadow seems to hold a threat. Every gust of wind sounds like the tramp of distant feet. The men look out towards the northern end of the pass, where the narrow road disappears into the haze. They know that just beyond that horizon, the largest army ever assembled is waiting. They can almost feel the ground vibrate with its sheer weight. But still, they wait, patient, resolute. Theirs is a defensive posture. They will not seek the battle. They will let the battle come to them, onto their chosen ground, on their terms. Then, it happens, a flicker of movement at the far end of the pass. At first, it's just a shimmer in the heat haze. Then, the shapes become clearer. Horsemen, Persian scouts, clad in brightly colored scale armor, their horses skittish and nervous. They are the heralds of the storm. They approach cautiously, their eyes wide with a mixture of arrogance and disbelief at the small force blocking their path. They observe the Greeks for a time, then wheel their horses around and gallop back to deliver their report to the great king. A wave of stillness passes through the Greek line. The quiet hum of activity ceases. All eyes are fixed on the end of the pass. The waiting is over. A single, sharp command cuts through the air. The sound is like the snapping of a giant bowstring. In perfect, terrifying unison, the first few ranks of the phalanx lower their 8-foot spears. The upright forest of wood and iron transforms into a bristling wall of sharpened points, leveled at chest height. The sun glints off thousands of deadly iron tips. The hot gates are now sealed. The front line braces, planting their feet firmly in the Greek soil. The men in the ranks behind them push forward, adding their weight and strength to the wall of shields. The phalanx is no longer a static formation. It is a coiled spring, a beast of shields and spears ready to unleash its fury. The first clash is now inevitable. The legend of Thermopylae is about to be written in blood and bronze. Thank you for watching this chapter of our journey into the ancient world. If you found this story as powerful as we do, please hit the like button and subscribe to our channel for more tales of history's greatest conflicts. Don't forget to ring the bell so you never miss an episode. Let us know in the comments what you think of the Greek strategy. See you next time. The sun climbs higher, its rays glinting off a sea of bronze and iron. From the Persian lines, a roar erupts, a sound like a tidal wave of men. The first wave surges forward, a torrent of infantry flooding the narrow pass. They are the Medes and the Scythians, subjects of the great king, sent to break the stubborn Greek line. They run headlong into a wall. Not of stone, but of bronze shields and iron will. This is the Spartan phalanx. The impact is deafening. Shields splinter, wood groaning under the immense pressure. It's a brutal, grinding cacophony of metal on metal, of desperate war cries and the sickening crunch of bone. Spears, the long doru of the Spartans, dart out from behind the shield wall like vipers, finding gaps in armor, piercing flesh. The Persians, armed with shorter spears and wicker shields, are at a horrifying disadvantage. They can't reach the men who are killing them. The air grows thick with dust and the coppery tang of blood. Arrows arc overhead, a black cloud blotting out the sun, but most clatter harmlessly against the interlocking Spartan shields, the men huddling beneath them like tortoises in their shells. This isn't a battle of individual heroes, it's a machine at work, a meat grinder. Every Spartan is a cog, moving with calm, terrifying precision. A man in the front rank falls, and instantly, a man from the rank behind steps forward to take his place, the shield wall never breaking, never faltering. It is a seamless, living fortress. They fight in shifts. After a time, the front ranks peel away, exhausted but orderly, and fresh men, rested and eager, move up to take their place. This rotation allows them to maintain a relentless, brutal intensity that the Persians simply cannot match. The attackers come on, wave after wave, driven by the whips of their officers, only to be chewed up and spat out by the Spartan machine. The ground before the Phocian wall becomes a slick, treacherous carpet of the dead and dying. The sea beside them begins to run red. From his golden throne set high on a nearby hill, Xerxes watches. He sees his men, the soldiers of his vast empire, thrown against this tiny Greek force and broken. He leaps to his feet not once, not twice, but 3 times, a spasm of fear and fury gripping him as he witnesses the sheer scale of the slaughter. These aren't just soldiers dying, it's his imperial prestige bleeding out onto the hot sand. His generals had promised him a swift victory, a simple crushing of a few provincial rebels. What he's seeing is a systematic dismantling of his army's might. The first day wears on, the sun beats down. The stench of sweat, blood, and death is overpowering. The initial Persian waves, already decimated, begin to falter. Their morale shatters against the unyielding bronze wall. They break, they flee, trampling their own wounded in a desperate scramble to escape the narrow killing ground. A brief, almost silent lull descends on the pass, punctuated only by the groans of the dying. The Spartans stand firm, their bronze armor stained and dented, their breathing heavy, but their line unbroken. They have held, but Xerxes is not a man to accept defeat. His frustration curdles into a cold resolve. He has a secret weapon, an elite force he believed he would never need to deploy against such a paltry foe. As the remnants of the first assaults are cleared away, a new sound begins to build. A steady, rhythmic tramp of thousands of marching feet. Out of the dust and the haze, they emerge, a new kind of soldier. Their armor is more ornate, their scaled corselets gleaming. They wear elaborate headgear, and their faces are grim, professional. Every man is the same height, the same build. If one falls, another from the ranks behind immediately steps forward to fill the gap, making them seem endless, unstoppable. They are the 10,000, the Athenatoi, the immortals. The personal bodyguard of the great king himself. Their commander, Hydarnes, leads them forward. This is no disorganized rabble. This is the hammer of the Persian Empire, the finest fighting force in the known world, sent to crush the anvil of Sparta. They advance not with a wild cry, but in an intimidating, disciplined silence. The air crackles with renewed tension. This is the true test. The elite of Persia against the elite of Greece. The Immortals charge. The clash is even more violent than before. These are professionals fighting professionals. The Spartans find their long spears are still an advantage, but the Immortals are skilled, pressing the attack with a ferocity the previous waves lacked. The fighting becomes a desperate, close-quarters struggle. Swords are drawn, men grapple hand to hand. The organized lines begin to blur into a chaotic swirl of individual duels. For hours, the brutal ballet of death continues. The Immortals press, and the Spartans give ground, but they do not break. They use their feigned retreat tactic, the anastraphia. Suddenly, as if on a single command, a section of the Spartan line appears to collapse, turning and running. The Immortals, sensing victory, roar and surge forward, their own discipline breaking in their eagerness to pursue. It's a trap. Just as the Persians are drawn in, and their formation loosens, the Spartans pivot. In perfect unison, they turn back into a solid line and charge into the now disorganized enemy. The surprise is total, the slaughter immense. The Immortals are caught off balance, cut down in heaps. Twice the Spartans execute this maneuver, and twice it turns the tide, inflicting devastating casualties on the king's finest. By the end of the second day, even the legendary Immortals are forced to withdraw, leaving thousands of their comrades dead in the pass. They have failed, the Greek line still holds. Xerxes is now beyond frustration. He is enraged, humiliated. His best troops, his invincible Immortals, have been blooded and repulsed by a handful of men in a goat track. The sun sets on another day of carnage, and a cold despair begins to creep into the Persian camp. 2 days of relentless assault, and nothing to show for it but mountains of his own dead. It seems the pass cannot be taken by force, but victory is not always won by force. Sometimes it is won by whispers in the dark. As Xerxes sits brooding on his throne, a shadow detaches itself from the twilight. A man is brought before him, a local, his face a mask of greed and resentment. He knows this land, its every path and secret trail. He bows before the great king and offers not a sword, but a piece of information, a secret. He speaks of a hidden path, a track that winds through the mountains, a way to bypass the wall of shields and spears. A way to get behind the Spartans. His name is Ephialtes. And for a promise of wealth and favor, he will lead the Persians through the darkness and onto the path of betrayal. Xerxes listens, and a slow, cruel smile spreads across his face. The tide is about to turn. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this chapter of history, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell to join us for the final, fateful day of the battle. The Battle of Thermopylae, 300 Spartans, 1,000 Thespians, and a few thousand other Greeks, standing defiant against a Persian host that numbered in the hundreds of thousands. For 2 days, this tiny force had held the line at the narrow pass known as the Hot Gates, turning the battlefield into a meat grinder for Xerxes' elite troops. The Persian king was growing desperate, frustrated, and enraged. How could his mighty empire be thwarted by a handful of stubborn warriors? But in the shadows of the Greek camp, a decision was being made that would change the course of the battle forever. A name was about to be etched into history, not for heroism, but for the ultimate act of betrayal. This is the story of Ephialtes of Trachis, the man who showed the Persians the secret path and sealed the fate of Leonidas and his 300. To understand the betrayal, we have to understand the man. Who was Ephialtes? History, as written by Herodotus, paints him as a local man, a Mullian Greek from the region of Trachis, just a stone's throw from Thermopylae. He wasn't a soldier or a king. He was likely a shepherd or a farmer, someone who knew the mountains around the pass like the back of his hand. He knew every goat trail, every hidden spring, and every secret path that wound its way through the treacherous terrain of Mount Kallidromos. One of these paths, the Anapaea path, was the key. It was a poorly guarded, little-known trail that could bypass the main Greek defensive position at the Hot Gates entirely. Ephialtes knew this path held immense strategic value. The question was, Why would a Greek betray his own people? Historians debate his motives. Herodotus suggests the most straightforward reason: greed. Ephialtes saw an opportunity for immense reward from the Persian king, Xerxes. Imagine the scene: a simple man, perhaps struggling to get by, is presented with a chance for unimaginable wealth and favor from the most powerful ruler in the world. All he had to do was share a secret. It's a classic tale of temptation. For a bag of gold, he was willing to sell out the very men who were fighting and dying to protect his homeland from invasion. Others have speculated that maybe there was more to it. Perhaps he held a personal grudge against the Spartans or other Greeks. Maybe he felt slighted, overlooked, or simply believed that Persian victory was inevitable and he was just choosing the winning side. The popular modern depiction of Ephialtes as a physically deformed outcast who was rejected by the Spartans is a dramatic invention for the movie 300. In reality, Herodotus makes no mention of any such deformity. The historical Ephialtes was likely an ordinary man who made an extraordinary and terrible choice, driven by a simple, timeless, and corrupting desire for personal gain. Whatever his true reason, his decision set in motion a chain of events that would lead to one of history's most legendary last stands. As the second day of brutal fighting drew to a close, with the ground soaked in the blood of thousands of Persian soldiers, Ephialtes made his move. Under the cloak of darkness, he approached the Persian camp. He must have been a nervous wreck, a lone Greek walking into the lion's den. He sought an audience with King Xerxes himself. Picture the scene: the great king, surrounded by his advisors and generals, fuming over his losses, and in walks this local shepherd. Ephialtes laid out his proposition. He told Xerxes of the Ephialtes path, a secret trail that would lead a detachment of Persian troops around the mountains and bring them down behind the Greek lines. For the first time in days, Xerxes saw a flicker of hope. He had found his key to unlocking the Greek defense. The deal was struck. Ephialtes would guide them, and in return, he would receive his reward. Xerxes didn't waste a moment. He summoned his most elite fighting force, the very heart of his army, the Immortals. These were 10,000 of the best soldiers in the Persian Empire, so named because their numbers were always kept at exactly 10,000. If one fell, another was immediately promoted to take his place, creating the illusion of an unkillable, immortal force. Under the command of their general, Hydarnes, the Immortals were tasked with this crucial flanking mission. As night fell completely over the mountains, the operation began. The air grew cold, and a heavy mist rolled in, blanketing the rocky slopes. Led by the traitor Ephialtes, the Immortals began their ascent. The only light came from flickering torches, casting long, dancing shadows that made the trees look like grasping specters. The only sounds were the crunch of thousands of boots on loose gravel, the clink of armor, and the hushed commands of the Persian officers. The Ephialtes path was not an easy road. It was steep, narrow, and treacherous. For the heavily armed Immortals, the climb was grueling. They moved in a long, silent column, a river of steel and shadow winding its way up the mountain. Ephialtes walked at the front, his knowledge of the terrain now a weapon turned against his own people. Every step they took was a step closer to the doom of the defenders below. The mood was thick with suspense and a sense of impending dread. This wasn't a glorious charge. It was a stealthy, cold-blooded maneuver, a dagger aimed at the back of an unsuspecting foe. Meanwhile, Leonidas and his men rested, unaware of the serpent slithering through the mountains above them. They had won the day, but they had no idea the night held a far greater danger. Now, the Greeks were not completely naive. Leonidas knew about the Ephialtes path. He knew it was a potential weakness in his otherwise impregnable position. To guard it, he had stationed a contingent of about 1,000 Phocian soldiers. The Phocians were from the local region and were specifically tasked with holding this mountain trail. They were positioned at the highest point of the path, where they could watch for any enemy movement. However, on this fateful night, a few things went disastrously wrong. The Phocians were camped in a clearing, and the dense forest and quiet of the night lulled them into a false sense of security. They likely believed that no army would dare to attempt such a difficult climb in the dark. As the immortals ascended, the sheer number of them, moving through the thick oak trees, created a rustling sound. Herodotus describes it as the sound of trampling on fallen leaves. The Phocian sentries heard it, and they scrambled to arm themselves, assuming it was the main Persian army launching a direct assault on their position. Panic set in. The Phocians were caught completely by surprise. In the pre-dawn gloom, they saw a massive force of elite Persian soldiers emerging from the trees. Arrows began to fly. The Phocians, believing they were the primary target, and that the rest of the Persian army was right behind, made a fatal tactical error. They retreated to a nearby hilltop to make a defensive stand, expecting a full-scale assault. But Hydarnes and the Immortals had no interest in fighting the Phocians. Their target was the pass below. Ignoring the retreating Phocians, the Persian column simply continued on its way, descending the other side of the mountain. The path was now wide open. The last line of defense had crumbled, not through force, but through surprise and miscalculation. Ephialtes' betrayal was complete. The trap was sprung. As dawn began to break, the final pieces fell into place. The Greeks in the main camp started to stir. It was then that their scouts, lookouts posted on the high ground, saw the unthinkable. Torches, thousands of them, descending from the mountain behind them. It was the Persians. The alarm spread through the camp like wildfire. Deserters from the Persian side also arrived, confirming the news. A massive force, guided by a Greek traitor, had bypassed their position. Leonidas now faced an impossible choice. He was caught in a vice, with the main Persian army in front of him and the Immortals at his back. The battle was, for all intents and purposes, lost. A council of war was held in haste. Most of the Greek commanders argued for a full retreat. To stay meant certain death. They could fall back, regroup, and fight another day, saving the bulk of their army. Leonidas agreed. He ordered the majority of the Greek contingent, the Corinthians, the Thebans who were willing, and others to withdraw. But he, his 300 Spartans, and the loyal Thespians would remain. Why? For the Spartans, retreat was not an option. Their law and their culture forbade it. They were taught to return from battle either with their shield or on it. To abandon their post was the ultimate dishonor. Furthermore, a prophecy from the oracle at Delphi had foretold that either Sparta would be destroyed or a Spartan king must die. Leonidas chose to fulfill the prophecy, sacrificing himself to save his city. The 700 Thespians, in an incredible act of bravery, chose to stay and die with him, knowing their own city was next in the Persian path. The 400 Thebans were forced to stay as hostages, as Leonidas suspected their loyalty. So, as the sun rose on the third day, a small, doomed force prepared to face the might of an empire from both front and back. The path of the traitor had led directly to the final, legendary stand of the heroes of Thermopylae. The stage was set for an ending that would echo through eternity. Thanks for watching, and if you enjoyed this piece of history, make sure to like and subscribe for more. The air at Thermopylae grows still, heavy with the coming dawn and the metallic scent of yesterday's fight. The great King Xerxes, frustrated by 2 days of failed assaults, now prepares his final, overwhelming move. He has found a way around the pass, a secret path that will allow his forces to encircle the small Greek army. The Phocian Guard, meant to protect this route, has been scattered. The trap is set. As the first light spills over the mountains, a scout returns, breathless, confirming the worst. The Persians are behind them. The pass is no longer a choke point, it is a tomb. A council of war is hastily called. Panic and despair ripple through the allied ranks. Most commanders argue for a retreat, a chance to fight another day, to regroup and save their men. They see no honor in a senseless slaughter, but Leonidas, king of Sparta, sees it differently. For him, the law of Sparta is absolute: never retreat, never surrender. He stands before his allies, his gaze steady, his voice calm amidst the growing fear. He tells them their duty is done. They have held the pass, bought precious time for Greece to prepare its defenses. He releases them from their oath, urging them to return to their homes, to their families, to carry the story of Thermopylae with them. He thanks them for their courage and their sacrifice. One by one, the allied contingents begin to withdraw, a somber procession disappearing back down the path they so fiercely defended. But not all leave. The 700 Thespians, led by their commander Demophilus, refuse to abandon Leonidas. They choose to stand and die alongside the Spartans, a testament to their unwavering loyalty and belief in the cause of freedom. A small force of Thebans is also compelled to stay, their loyalty suspect, kept more as hostages than allies. And so, the final defenders remain, 300 Spartans, 700 Thespians, and the reluctant Thebans. They are hopelessly outnumbered, a tiny island of defiance in a sea of Persian might. There is no hope of victory, no chance of survival. There is only the certainty of a glorious death. As the sun climbs higher, a strange calm settles over the Spartan camp. There are no frantic preparations, no desperate prayers. Instead, the men comb their long hair, a ritual they perform before a battle from which they do not expect to return. They share dark jokes, their laughter echoing defiantly in the quiet pass. They are Spartans, they were born for this moment. They look at each other, a silent understanding passing between them. This is the good death they have trained for their entire lives. Leonidas moves among them, his presence a source of immense strength. He claps a man on the shoulder, shares a final word with another. He looks at his small band of brothers, his royal guard, and a fierce pride burns in his eyes. He is said to have told them, "Have a good breakfast, men, for tonight we dine in the underworld." It is a declaration not of despair, but of acceptance of a fate they have chosen for themselves. Then, the ground begins to tremble. The roar of the Persian army approaches from both ends of the pass. Tens of thousands of warriors, the elite immortals among them, pour into the narrow space. The sky darkens with a storm of arrows, so thick it is said they blot out the sun. The Spartans and Thespians raise their shields, forming a tight wall of bronze and wood. A Spartan warrior named Denix famously quips, "Good, then we shall have our battle in the shade." With a deafening cry, Leonidas leads the charge. This is no longer a defensive stand. This is a final, suicidal assault. The Greeks surge forward, leaving the narrowest part of the pass to fight in the open, determined to inflict as much damage as possible before they are overwhelmed. They fight not for victory, but for glory. The battle is a whirlwind of chaos and violence. The Spartans, masters of close-quarters combat, are a terrifying force. Their spears shatter, and they draw their short swords, the Xephos, carving a bloody path through the enemy ranks. They fight with a fury born of desperation and an unyielding will. They are no longer men, they are an extension of the god of war himself. They fall, but for every Greek that goes down, 10 Persians fall with him. The sheer weight of numbers begins to tell. The Persian tide is relentless. They press in from all sides, a crushing wave of bodies. The Greek line bends, but it does not break. They form a circle, back to back, protecting their flanks, their shields locked together. Leonidas is at the forefront of the fighting, a lion among men. He cuts down 2 of Xerxes' own brothers, his rage and skill a terrifying sight, but even a king can fall. A Persian spear finds its mark, and Leonidas, king of Sparta, sinks to his knees. A furious struggle erupts over his body. The Spartans, seeing their king fall, are driven to a new level of frenzy. For times the Persians are driven back as the Greeks fight to recover their fallen leader. They will not allow his body to be taken, to be desecrated. Finally, they succeed, dragging Leonidas's body back to a small hillock within the pass. This is their last stand. Their numbers have dwindled. Their weapons are broken, their bodies battered and bleeding. They fight now with their hands, their teeth, their raw courage. The remaining Spartans and Thespians make their final stand on that small hill, a monument of defiance. Xerxes, unwilling to sacrifice any more of his best troops to the Spartans' blades, gives the order. The archers draw their bows one last time. A final, lethal volley of arrows rains down upon the hill. One by one, the last of the defenders fall, buried under a forest of Persian shafts until not a single man is left standing. Silence descends upon the battlefield. The pass, once filled with the screams of battle, is now eerily quiet. The ground is slick with blood and covered with the bodies of thousands. The great Persian army stands victorious, their banners rising over the silent pass. They have won the battle, but the cost has been immense. They have witnessed a bravery that defies comprehension. Though the bodies of the 300 Spartans and their loyal allies lay still at Thermopylae, their story was just beginning. Their sacrifice was not in vain. They had bought the time Greece so desperately needed, and more importantly, they had created a legend. A story of courage, of sacrifice, of a few who stood against many for the ideal of freedom. A story that would echo through the ages, inspiring generations to come. The Battle of Thermopylae was over, but the legacy of the 300 had just been born. Thank you for watching. If this story of heroism inspired you, please like this video and subscribe to our channel for more epic tales from history. We'll see you next time. History is not just a collection of dates and events. It's a tapestry woven with stories of courage, sacrifice, and the indomitable human spirit. Among these tales, few resonate as powerfully as the Battle of Thermopylae. It's more than a battle. It's a legend that has echoed through millennia, shaping the very course of Western civilization. Today, we journey back to a narrow coastal pass in ancient Greece to understand how the sacrifice of a few became the inspiration for millions. The year is 480 BC. The mighty Persian Empire, under King Xerxes, has amassed an army of unprecedented size, marching to subjugate the free city-states of Greece. Their path leads them to a narrow pass called Thermopylae, meaning the hot gates. It is here that a small, determined force of Greeks, led by King Leonidas of Sparta and his 300 personal guards, decides to make a stand. They knew the odds were impossible. They knew they were marching to their deaths, yet they went anyway. Why? Because freedom was a cause worth dying for. For 3 days, this small band of warriors held back the torrent of the Persian army. The terrain was their ally. In the narrow pass, the Persians' overwhelming numbers counted for little. The Greeks, with their superior training, discipline, and bronze armor, fought with a ferocity that stunned their invaders. Herodotus, the ancient historian, tells us that Xerxes leapt from his throne in terror 3 times as he watched his elite troops, the Immortals, being repelled again and again. The Spartans and their allies were a wall of bronze and courage, unbreakable and unyielding. They were fighting not just for their lives, but for their homes, their families, and their way of life. But legends are often born from tragedy. A local resident, hoping for a reward, betrayed the Greeks. He showed the Persians a hidden mountain path that allowed them to encircle the Greek position. When Leonidas learned of the betrayal, his decision was swift and resolute. He ordered the majority of the Greek contingent to retreat and save themselves, to fight another day, to carry the story of Thermopylae back to their cities. But he, his 300 Spartans, and a few hundred loyal Thespians and Thebans chose to stay. Their duty was to delay the Persian advance for as long as possible, buying precious time for the rest of Greece to prepare its defenses. Their final stand was an act of pure, calculated sacrifice. Surrounded and hopelessly outnumbered, they fought to the last man. They fought with their spears until they shattered, then with their swords, and finally, with their bare hands and teeth. They fell, but they did not yield. In their defeat, they secured a victory far greater than any single battle. They had shown the world that even a god king like Xerxes could be made to bleed, that the mighty Persian war machine was not invincible. The news of their sacrifice spread like wildfire across Greece. It was a thunderclap that awakened a divided collection of city-states. The story of Thermopylae transformed them. Where there was once rivalry and distrust, a new sense of unity began to form. The Athenians, the Corinthians, the Thebans, they were no longer just citizens of their own cities. They were Greeks, united against a common foe. The 300 Spartans had not died in vain, they had lit a beacon of hope and defiance. This newfound unity and inspiration proved decisive. A month later, at the naval Battle of Salamis, the Greek fleet, though outnumbered, used clever strategy to lure the larger Persian navy into the narrow straits, where they scored a stunning and pivotal victory. The following year, at the Battle of Plataea, the final land battle of the invasion, a unified Greek army, inspired by the memory of Leonidas and his men, decisively crushed the remaining Persian forces, ending Xerxes' ambitions in Greece for good. Thermopylae was the moral catalyst for these victories. The soldiers at Plataea fought with the spirit of the 300 in their hearts, shouting their names as they charged into battle. The legend of Thermopylae did not end with the defeat of the Persians. It became the foundational story of Western military ethos. It taught generations that courage is not the absence of fear, but the triumph over it. It became a powerful symbol of fighting for one's homeland against overwhelming odds, of choosing death before dishonor, and of the power of sacrifice for a greater good. Philosophers wrote about it, poets sang of it, and parents told the story to their children. Over the centuries, the story has been retold countless times, inspiring soldiers from the Roman legions to the modern era. It has become a universal symbol of patriotism and self-sacrifice. The stand at the hot gates demonstrated that a small group of determined individuals, bound by a common purpose, can change the course of history. It proves that ideas, freedom, duty, honor are more powerful than any army. Today, if you visit the site of the battle, you will find a modern monument to Leonidas. But the ancient memorial is perhaps the most poignant. A simple stone was placed there, bearing an inscription by the poet Simonides. It captures the essence of the Spartan spirit with a quiet, profound dignity. It reads, "Go tell the Spartans, stranger passing by, that here obedient to their laws we lie, they did their duty. They obeyed their laws, the laws that demanded they stand their ground, no matter the cost. Their legacy is not one of conquest or empire, but of a sacrifice so profound it became eternal." It is the story of how 300 men, by choosing to die, ensured that a nation and an idea would live forever. Thank you for joining us on this journey into the heart of one of history's most powerful legends. If you found this story as inspiring as we do, please like this video, subscribe to our channel, and hit the notification bell so you don't miss our next exploration into the events that shaped our world. Until next time.
As we close this chapter of the Chrono Archives, remember, the past is never truly gone. It waits patiently in the shadows of forgotten ruins, in the echoes of ancient voices, and in the timeless lessons that still guide us today. It waits to be remembered by curious minds like yours. Thank you for joining us on this extraordinary journey through the annals of time. If today's exploration of lost civilizations, mythical legends, or historical enigmas ignited your passion for the past, hit that like button, drop a comment with your favorite moment or what you'd love to see next, and most importantly, subscribe to the Chrono Archives and continue the journey through time. Turn on notifications so you never miss an episode where we unearth buried secrets, decode ancient mysteries, and bring history's greatest stories back to life. Together, we'll keep the flame of the past burning bright. Until next time, fellow time travelers, keep questioning, keep discovering, and keep remembering. The Chrono Archives, where the past lives forever.